Welcome to the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections. Once again, I'd like to show you the best way to use Phil Steele Plus. Also get you some free plays and some interesting info that you might not know that's out there. And I'll say here at the top, I've been doing some radio shows this week. I have a slight head cold this week. It's been bothering my voice a little bit. So sometimes when I'm doing the radio shows, when it gets to the second half of the radio shows, my voice starts to give out. So if it does, bear with me. In the second half of this, I'll talk a little lighter. Maybe I'll preserve the voice a little bit more. I've done a little research on the Phil Steele Plus Tour so far and broke down the individual records. When we have forecast FBS versus FBS games in the first 6 weeks, 20-13 is the record, so that's pretty solid. Disappointed in the FCS record. It's and any time I've included an FCS team, so far it's 4-7, an 0-2 last week. So the FBS versus FBS last week went 4-2, but the FCS games went 0-2 last week, 4-7 on the year, and the NFL are 2-2. I've only had 4 of them so far this year. Part of it is that I don't spend enough time probably utilizing all the stuff we have on the site for the FCS games. I only spend a couple hours looking at these 80 games, whereas the FBS versus FBS games, naturally, I've spent the entire offseason looking at these. But let's get to it. We'll start off with Boston College against NC State. And you've got them pulled up right here on the start of the site. And as you know, NC State is a 3-point favorite in this game. Now, a couple things to point out. First of all, the Phil Steele magazine. You've got to use this if you're handicapping at all. The Phil Steele magazine gives you complete spread records over the last 10 years. You can't get this anywhere else. This tells you where the coaches are. As you can tell, this block is on. This is just one of the many things in the Phil Steele magazine. As you can tell, Jeff Hafley took over here. But let's check out this home dog line for this week. And on the home dog line, we see that Boston College went 2-1 last year, 3-0 in 19, 1-0-1, and 3-1. So the current streak here was 5-1, 6-1-1, 9-2-1. They were a home dog once this year. That was against Missouri. They came out a winner. So 10-2-1 as a home dog. I always like to play Boston College at home. This game's at night as well, which means it's going to be a pumped-up home crowd, so you like that. All right, so I do use this right here, these logs. I got 130 of these logs. They're all in the magazine. Just flip to your magazine. Use them weekly. Check out how teams do as a home dog, how they maybe do against conference play. As you can see here, look at this. This is how they do against non-conference. You can see BC lately just 1-5 non-conference. That was coming into the year. How they do off a straight-up win, how they do off a straight-up loss. Up here, these are straight-up records. This is how they do straight up. These are all against the spread records down here. Make sure you utilize that to its fullest. But let's go ahead and take a look here at this Boston College game. We'll look at the series. Now, remember, when you click down here, click on the opponent, and that gives you the last 24 years matchups. And out here, if it's green, that means the team won the game. If it's red, that means the team lost the game in this column. This is your spread record. And once again, you do not have to do any math. You don't have to do any thinking. Everything is color-coded green and red. So if it's green out here, that means Boston College covered the spread. And if we look at the last 7 meetings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Boston College is 6-1 against the spread. And look out here, upsets in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 years. They've had 4 outright upsets. If the upset is green, that means Boston College got the upset. And I'll show you on NC State, for example. Let me click to NC State, and we take a look at the Boston College one. You'll see these upsets are in red. That means NC State lost or was upset in those games. You see the red in this column. That means they lost those games. So everything color-coded green and red. This year, Todd put these in. You see that this game generally goes under. 5-1 to the under, although last year it did not at 45-24. So we got that going for us. And then, if you want to compare the Clemson game, NC State beat Clemson by 6. Boston College lost to Clemson by 6. But NC State was at home, fired up home crowd, and won in 2 overtimes against Clemson. So what was Boston College walking into? They were taking on Clemson the week after a loss and playing them in Death Valley. Now, when you click on box out here, that gives you the box score of the game. And once again, I'd like to thank collegepressbox.com for allowing us to put, they're the ones that post the box scores. They allow me to repost them. Thank you very much, Ted Ganji. Thank you, collegepressbox.com, for allowing me to repost these. But these are the box scores of the game. And they give you the stats, they give you the starters, they give you everything you need. I mean, there's drive-by-drive. There's your starters for the game. There's your participation chart. Here's your play-by-play. I go through the play-by-play of every single game every week just to see how the games were played. And collegepressbox.com is a big help in that. But anyway, let's take a look at the end of the game. Boston College down by 6. They're driving. Look at this. They're all the way down at the Clemson 11-yard line. And then what happens? They snapped the ball to Grissel. He took his eyes off the ball, fumbled. And what could have been a Boston College road win at Clemson, playing Clemson off a loss, turned into a 6-point loss. So I was very impressed with BC in that game, even though they lost. And even though they lost to Clemson, they beat Clemson. Once again, I think BC was in a much tougher situation and could easily have won that game as well. So let's add it all up. We've looked at the box. We've got everything. Yep, we're going to go with Boston College +3 over NC State as your first official play today. Now, once again, you go to the team pages. They've got them all lined up here for you. We're going to take a look at Mississippi State against Alabama. I know what your first thought is. Alabama's off a loss. They're going to kill Mississippi State. I mean, remember the Mississippi game? They won. It says 42-21 here, but once again, if you're looking at the, you see it was 28-0 at the half, and we can go back and look and see that it was 42-7, and Ole Miss got a couple of late touchdowns. So really, Alabama dominated that game even more than the 42-21. Utilize all this stuff on philsteele.com. I can't look at a game without utilizing all this different stuff. And one quick note here I'll say about Phil Steele Plus, and that is when you go to the store, you can get Phil Steele Plus for the rest of the year right here. And it is $69 or $29 if you just want the FCS. So just go to the store and order it there if you want. But let's talk this game here, Alabama against Mississippi State. So Alabama's off a loss. They're going to kill them. Your first question's got to be, how does Nick Saban do off a loss? I would have thought, prior to looking at the magazine this week, Nick Saban off a loss, give me 11-1 against the spread, right? He's actually lost 18 games at Alabama. 18. And so you would have to think he has a tremendous record. Well, let's go take a look at your magazine page. Right there, we have a coach's history on every team. Here's their straight-up records for each coach. This is here at Alabama. This is overall. And then your ATS records. Here's how they do as a home favorite, home dog, away favorite, away dog, versus conference, versus non-conference. And then off a straight-up loss. Does this number surprise you at all? 6-12. I would have thought 18 games, 15-3, right? Nope, 6-12 against the spread off a straight-up loss. Now he has covered his last 3, so at one point he was 3-12, but 6-12. So it's not an automatic play. Alabama off a loss, automatic play, right? No, that's 6-12. That doesn't scream automatic play. This coaching box, by the way, every single Phil Steele magazine, it's all 130 teams. Complete in-depth coverage, and it's all there. You don't have to do any research. But let's get right now to this game. And when we take a look at the game, last week A&M got the big win at home. That was actually Alabama's second road game of the year. They went to Florida and struggled. They got outgained in that game by 115 yards, won by 2, lost to A&M. And Mississippi State, meanwhile, is in a great situation. They are right here. They're off a bye. And now they're playing Alabama. So you have a team that was rested, off a bye, at home, taking on a team on their second straight road game, and one that doesn't play as well as you would think off a straight-up loss. The next category we look at is how Mississippi State's done. Now, they've got 2 losses this year, but look at this. They had a 468 to 246 yard edge. They outgained them by 222 yards. Memphis, I'm talking about. LSU, they lost to by 3. But they had a 487 to 343 yard edge, plus 144 yards in that game. For the season, they're plus 111 yards. Their defense holding foes to 124 yards below their season average. And what this does, it takes a look at Louisiana Tech and Louisiana Tech's yardage average in games not involving Mississippi State. Then it takes a look at how they did versus Mississippi State. As you can see here, Mississippi State held them to 55 yards below their season average, which means when Louisiana Tech's not playing Mississippi State, they are averaging 216 yards or 416 yards per game. Mississippi State held them to 369. This Memphis game, they were 304 below. That means put 304 on top of here. Memphis in games not involving Mississippi State averaged 550 yards per game. Mississippi State held them to 246, which is 304 below their season average in games not involving Mississippi State. So that's what this number is out here. And this number here is they held them to a number one season low. That was the best any team's done against NC State. That's the best any team's done against Memphis. Second best against Louisiana Tech. Second best against LSU. In A&M, they're only third best, held them to 96 yards below their season average. Interesting, Mississippi State held Texas A&M to 297 yards. Alabama allowed 379. So that's interesting as well. And keep in mind, Mississippi State was also at Texas A&M for that game. A game, by the way, Mississippi State won. So now let's take a look at the average game grade. The beautiful thing about the average game grade, it has nothing to do with the team. There's no power rating of Mississippi State involved in there. All it involves is the power rating of your opponent and the score of the game, your yards of the game. Yards rushing, yards passing, yards rushing, yards passing, defense, and the score of the game and the opponent. So you'll see, let's see what their best game is. Well, actually, their best game is a win over NC State or over Texas A&M. This game here against Louisiana Tech, they only earned a 94.8 game grade, even though they won the game. So they average on the year 109.7. Alabama's 119. You add in the home field edge, add a little bit for the situational edge. You got Alabama winning this game. You know, you got the cowbells, you got the team off a bye versus a team on a second straight road game. Alabama by about 6, and the Tide's laying 17 points here. So you've got a team that's 3-2. Their two losses, they outgained their opponents by 222 and 144. My computer actually only has Alabama outgaining Mississippi State by 6 yards here. I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to take Mississippi State plus 17. I'm not calling for a second upset. No way. But 17 points is a nice little cushion for a team that's got the situational edge, and the power ratings seem to line up pretty well. So we're going to go with Mississippi State plus 17 over Alabama. All right, this next one you knew was coming up here. I talked last week. If you didn't watch last week's, watch last week's. I put a lot of information out here. The FBS plays went 4-2. Learn how we went 4-2 last week. You get all the info. But we're going to take a look at Texas A&M against Missouri. Now, I told you last week, Missouri had lost 8 straight games against the spread. I told you my philosophy on streaks. And I also said if Missouri didn't cover, which they didn't, that they'd be back on again. They'll be on every week until they actually cover a game. So last week, North Texas covered against Missouri, and that was a 9th straight spread loss for Missouri. Now, once again, this one here, I just talked about Alabama off a loss. Generally, you think a team's in a letdown spot if they pull a big upset like that. And I'm 100% behind that philosophy. You take a look at Iowa-Purdue. That'll be one of my quick hitters. And yes, I agree with that philosophy 100%. If A&M right now is 6-0, I would definitely be leaning Missouri, except for the fact Missouri's lost 9 in a row against the spread. But I would definitely not be picking A&M. However, Texas A&M's season, they came into the season thinking national title. They opened up 3-0, a non-impressive 3-0. They weren't really dominant. And then they lost to Arkansas and they lost to Mississippi State. Season done, especially after you're going to lose to Alabama at home. Now you're 3-3, and that season of high expectations is out the window. Well, guess what? They are reborn. They got a new life. In fact, if Alabama slips up once and Texas A&M runs the table, and look, they'll be favored at Missouri, be favored against South Carolina, be favored against Auburn, be favored against Mississippi, favored against Prairie View A&M, and favored against LSU on the road, most likely. If A&M runs the table, Alabama slips up once more, all of a sudden Texas A&M is the SEC West champ. So they actually are reborn. So I don't think there's going to be a letdown. If anything, I think there's going to be a push. Remember earlier in the year I talked about BYU or maybe I just did on my radio shows. BYU was off that big upset of Utah. They had ended a 11-game losing streak to Utah. They hosted Arizona State the next week, and they actually got more fired up. A season of low expectations had turned into a season of high expectations, and they beat Arizona State the next week. So I think A&M's going to be fired up for this. Plus, let's take a look at last year. When was A&M most successful? Running the football. Look at this. They ran the ball down teams' throats. They won football games. Isaiah Spiller, Devon Chain emerged late in the year. And I think they have one of the best running back cores in the country. Spiller and a Chain right here. See how they've been doing. Gives you a break every single week, broken down. And so I think that when you take a look at that, look at this red over here. Missouri, giving up 287 yards on the ground, 6.1 yards per carry. So that is a nice matchup for A&M. When they're able to run the ball, they're going to do better. And plus, Zach Calzada. Here's the thing about Calzada. He was not wonderful. I mean, nothing great in here. But I thought against Alabama, he became a quarterback. He's going to be highly confident now. He's gone through his growing pains. He forced into the starting role here against New Mexico because Haynes King got injured. And Zach Calzada just came into his own last week. So now you've got a quarterback. You've got the run game. They should be able to take advantage of this defense. And A&M's just a better team. And remember, when Missouri played a team in Tennessee that could run the football, they got absolutely mauled. 45-10 at the half. Tennessee had 425 yards at the half. Tennessee, Texas A&M, I'm still going to say Texas A&M's a better team. So I think they can do to Missouri what Tennessee did to Missouri. Boston College ran the ball in Missouri, and I was surprised to see the line on this is single digits. Texas A&M's only about a 9-point favorite in this game. So we're going to keep picking against Missouri until they actually cover. The final factor I want to point out, A&M's taking on the number 9 schedule in the country. Missouri, number 86. I mean, there's no Alabamas over here. Missouri's minus 31 yards per game. A&M's plus 23. So clearly a better team. Clearly a situation. Look at the average game grade. They're playing to an average game grade of 109.2. They're playing to an average game grade of 92. So even if you add a 3-point home edge here at 95, that still says A&M by 14. And so I like A&M. I'm laying the 9. Take Texas A&M minus 9 over Missouri. Let's take a look at Oklahoma State against Texas. Big matchup here. You got a 5-0 Oklahoma State against a Texas team off a disappointing loss against Oklahoma. And Texas is a 4-point favorite, you're wondering? Well, there's reasons why. And I like Texas in this one. First of all, let's look at Oklahoma State a little bit closer. They're playing to an average game grade of 103.5, despite the fact they're 5-0. Texas, despite the fact they're 4-2, playing to an average game grade of 111.5. That's 8 points better. Now factor in the home edge. Let's give Texas a 4-point home edge. Let me flip to my magazine real quick. I have home field edges, and these things are not just numbers at the top of the page. I have a home field edge file which sees how the teams have done straight up against the spread at home, how they compare to home record versus away record, the average attendance. I put my own personal thoughts in there about each team. I gave Texas a 4.5 home field edge. So if you give them a 4.5 home field edge, and they're already favored to win by 8, that's Texas by 12.5. The line is 4. So I like Texas. Let's drill in a little bit on Oklahoma State's wins. They beat Missouri State 23-16. Now, Missouri State's led by Bobby Petrino, but I don't even think Missouri State's playing that well this year. Let's go take a look. You come down here to the FCS. You can just click right up here, FCS team pages. They're all in alphabetical order. Let's go take a look and see what Missouri State's doing. You see Bobby Petrino's their head coach. Okay, they lost to Oklahoma State. They did beat Central Arkansas. They beat South Dakota. They beat Illinois State. They lost to Youngstown State. Okay, they're not doing bad. And they played better last year. Remember, they played in the spring or in the fall a little bit. Then they played in the spring and did well. They do have, they got a new quarterback this year. It looks like Jaden Johnson was the QB last year. They went to Jason Shelley this year. He's FBS transfer. So they're a decent team. I'll give them that. You can look this up in a minute. Like I said, I thought Missouri State was struggling. Maybe, I'm not sure why I thought they were struggling this year. It must have been they didn't cover a game earlier in the year that I thought they would cover or something like that. But let's go back to this matchup. Tulsa. If you look at that Tulsa game, Tulsa could easily have beaten them. This final's 28-23. You could click on the box and take a look here. You see that Tulsa actually led this thing 17-14 in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma State got a 98-yard kick return for a touchdown to take the lead. They scored here, and this was on a 72-yard drive, and then Tulsa scored late. But Tulsa was actually leading in the fourth quarter. Go to the Boise game. Boise missed a field goal at the end of the game. Once again, you just click on a box. It tells you all this stuff. Boise led 20-7, and Oklahoma State came back and won. In fact, Boise had a interception return for a touchdown, called dead on by a whistle, and then missed a field goal at the end of the game, which could have beat them. Now, they beat Kansas State, but one thing I want to point out about Kansas State in that game, and it was a game I liked Kansas State, but unfortunately, Will Howard was the quarterback. Now, the thing about Will Howard, great kid, but last year when Will Howard took over as starting quarterback, let's take a look at last year. And check out these individual stat leaders, by the way. See these individual player leaders? You can see last year Kansas State at one point was 4-1, and then they lost their last 5 games. Well, the reason for that, Skylar Thompson was your starting quarterback, and then Will Howard took over, and the team struggled to throw the ball. Look at these passing numbers: 143, 32, 88, 174. With Will Howard at quarterback, he can run, but he's not that accurate of a passer. Skylar Thompson's an NFL caliber quarterback. He could very well be playing in the NFL. Is there a difference in the pass game? Yes. Let's go take a look at that game. Individual player stats. Will Howard didn't start the opener. Thompson did. Thompson got injured against Southern Illinois. They managed to win. Then they played Nevada. They did beat Nevada at home with Will Howard at quarterback, hitting 7 of 10 for 123. But against Oklahoma State, I mean, they couldn't even get a first down. Oklahoma State stacked the line, took away the run, said, go ahead and beat us, Will Howard. He had 4 of 12 for 50 yards. Now, you might say, hey, Kansas State played Oklahoma tough, right? I mean, actually, they did get a couple of late scores. But anyway, going back to that game, who was your quarterback? Skylar Thompson unexpectedly returned, 29 of 41, 320. All of a sudden, they had a pass game to go along with Deuce Vaughn. They're a much better team. So the team that Oklahoma State beat was not the A team for Kansas State. It was the B team. And then the Baylor game, now I give them this. They had a 14-0 first down edge at the half, 256-99. But in the fourth quarter, it was 17-14. They added a touchdown with 2 minutes and 4 seconds to go to win that game by 10. So it's not an overwhelming Oklahoma State team. Average game grades tell you that. They do all this research. They say, who's the opponent? What'd you do yard-wise? What'd you do point-wise? Comes up 103.5. Meanwhile, Texas, I got to tell you guys, I picked Oklahoma to win the national title. I'm still hanging by that. I'm still hoping Oklahoma does. Everybody asks me every year, Phil, who's your favorite team in the country? And I do have a favorite team every year. It's the one I pick higher than everybody else, so it varies every year. Last year, A&M was one of my favorite teams. They're my number one surprise team in the country heading in. They almost made the playoff. But when you take a look at Texas this year, yeah, they lost to Arkansas. That's a game everybody remembers. But other than that, they've been dominant. I mean, they beat Louisiana. They buried Rice. They buried Texas Tech. The TCU game is 32-27. But one thing I want to point out there, let's look at the box real quick. Texas is up in this game 32-20. And let's go look at the play-by-play. They're up by 12 points. I watched this game, so I didn't have to go through the play-by-play. Well, I watch them all, but then I go through the play-by-play to reaffirm what I saw. So Texas is down here up 32-20. And they have a 4th and goal at the TCU 1, and they get stopped on downs with 9:32 left in the game. TCU then goes 99 yards and 13 plays, gets a touchdown, only loses by 5. So it looks like it was a close game. But had they punched it in right here, you're talking about a 3-score lead for Texas. And that game was at TCU. So it was a very impressive game. And a lot of these yards here, the 99 of those came in that late drive. And then last week, I mentioned Oklahoma. I was down at the half. I was like, damn, I lost my number one pick. They're gone. They lost. They're not going to make the playoff this year. They're down 38-20. Texas was playing a great game. You know how that game was. It was one of the most exciting games of the weekend. Thank goodness Oklahoma won, but Texas really impressed me. And the other thing I want to show you here, let's take a look at the individual player stats. Now, they opened up the year with Hudson Court as the starting QB. Thompson led him to a couple of scores against Arkansas late. Now, let's take a look at Thompson. He became the starting quarterback here, so he's got 4 starts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see what Texas is averaging in those games. 620, 639, 414, 516. And they're not playing Little Sisters of the Poor. They're playing 3 Big 12 teams here, 58, 70, 32, and 48. When Casey Thompson's a starting quarterback at Texas, they average 52 points per game. And in case you're worried about letdown, you can go here and look them up individually. The last 40 years results. It takes you all the way back to 1976. Gives you every spread on every game, every score in every game. All you have to do is click on last 40 years. And this is actually the last 45 years. Todd's going to have to update one of these days. He doesn't know how to add, I think. So he's got last 40 years up there, but it's really the last 45 years. Well, he's got 40 plus. Okay, I'll give him the plus sign. That's easier. But when you look at Texas, let's go back to that last 40 years results. If you went back and looked at how they did the week after playing Oklahoma and added it all up, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. Texas is 18-2 straight up, 14-6 against the spread after Oklahoma. Go ahead, start here in 2001. Take a look how they do after Oklahoma each year and figure it out. You'll see it right there. By the way, at the bottom of these, you could tell who the coach was. John Makovic, Mac Brown had that great run. Charlie Strong, Tom Herman. I thought he did a good job building the team for Sarkisian. Now, here it says, and this is something that Todd's going to have to get corrected. It says Steve Sarkisian was the coach last year. Steve Sarkisian was not the coach last year. So Todd got something a little wrong there. The head coach last year was Tom Herman. And he'll have that corrected probably by the time you look at this on the Texas 40-year results. But anyway, if you go back and look at it, Texas does well in this situation. Add it all up. I'm going to take Texas -4 over Oklahoma State. Now let's take a look at the Colorado State-New Mexico game. And for this one, we're going to put Colorado State on the left, and we're going to put New Mexico on the right. There we go. All right, Colorado State on the left, New Mexico on the right. Colorado State opened the season very disappointing. They lost to South Dakota State and Vanderbilt, both as a favorite, both at home. But since then, they've been dominant. And when I talked to Coach Adazio post-spring, he felt they had the best defense in the Mountain West Conference. After these first 2 games, I'm like, you know what? I don't believe anything Coach Adazio tells me anymore. But look at this. They went in to face Toledo, maybe the best team in the MAC, beat them 22-6, home to 291 yards. Then they played some team named Iowa. Last time I checked, Iowa was number 2 in the country. Look at the score. 14-7 at the half. Colorado State held them to 278 yards. That was the second best any team's done against Iowa all year. It was the best anybody's done against Toledo all year, by the way, 122 yards below their season average. Then last week they played defending Mountain West champion San Jose, and they had a 182-yard edge, home to 267 yards, 13 first downs, 11, 12, 13 first downs. They aren't giving up anything. All right, now let's go take a look at the New Mexico offense. And I love green-red matchups. So you see we got a green defense here. How about this red offense? New Mexico is struggling to move the ball. Terry Wilson, the Kentucky transfers, come over. Let's make sure he's still even playing. Yeah, he played the last game, 13-25. He struggled to pass the ball a little bit at Kentucky, and sort of the same way here. They have had 122, 288, 226, 193 yards. They are averaging, they had 278 yards below what this team averages, allowing 16, 66, 96. They're minus 68, 119 in the country. So you got this red. You got a green defense. In fact, over the last 3 weeks, if you add these 3 numbers up, Colorado State is playing to an average game grade of 109.4. New Mexico, the last 4 weeks, is playing to an average game grade of 82.4. So 109. Give New Mexico a 3-point home edge. That's 85. You're talking about New Mexico or Colorado State win this game by 24. And the spread's only 10.5. I think that's rather cheap. Can't imagine the New Mexico home crowd is going to be all that intimidating. New Mexico fans probably just go there for the atmosphere. And then, I think what I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably start putting logs up on philsteele.com so you can actually see the spread records. But New Mexico is 0-6 against the spread this year. They didn't cover against Houston Baptist or New Mexico State. They were favored by 24.5 and 19.5. They were a 30-point dog against A&M and didn't cover. A 2-point favorite against UTEP and lost outright. 11.5-point dog against Air Force at home and lost by 28. And a 19-point dog against San Diego State. So here's one of your streaks. And we'll play this one till the end of the season if we have to. Same thing I talked about last week with streaks. New Mexico is 0-6 against the spread. If they lose, they'll be on this one again next week. We'll go against New Mexico again. So you got a poor offense against a very good defense. A defense that somehow didn't play great the first 2 games. Is playing better. And then let's look at the series history. Your final clincher here. Colorado State. If you look at the series history, look at all the green here. Colorado State has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games in a row in the series. And if you look at the spread, they have covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 8 games against the spread. So you have series history, dominant defense versus a weak offense, streak. You got a lot of stuff going there. We're going Colorado State minus 10.5 over New Mexico. Let's take a look at Louisiana Tech against UTEP. And this one I find a little intriguing. Once again, we're going to put the home team on the right, and that is Louisiana Tech. Or, no, excuse me, it's UTEP. UTEP's at home. You look at UTEP, 5-1 this year. And they are a good team. I'll give you that. I mean, they've got Gavin Hardison has got an NFL caliber arm. This guy's got a cannon for an arm. In fact, Coach Dimmel told me that it's the strongest arm he's ever had for a quarterback, ever. They've got Cowing and Garrett, 2 explosive receivers, and they have a pass rush. They've got 8 sacks the last 2 weeks. Check out your magazine for the write-up on the defensive line of UTEP. They are a quality team. But I just think Louisiana Tech's a better team, and the situation favors Louisiana Tech in the fact that they're not going to look past UTEP. Look at who UTEP's beaten. New Mexico State, Bethune-Cookman, New Mexico, Old Dominion, Southern Miss. Now, here's another thing I want to point out about the site, and once again, it's the purpose of these whole videos. Let's go to the home page. When you click on the home page, you can come over here to FBS information, and then you go to, let's go to strength of wins, pain of losses. Now, what this does is if you defeat a team, you get credit for every win versus an FBS team that team has. If you lose to a team, you get credit for every loss that team has. FCS, FBS, doesn't matter what the loss is. Well, let's take a look at what UTEP's record is. They have 5 wins. What is their record? They have 1 combined full win. In other words, New Mexico State, Bethune-Cookman, New Mexico, Old Dominion, and Southern Miss have combined to defeat 1 FBS opponent. Do you think that's a weak schedule? I think so. Now let's drill in a little bit and take a look at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech comes in here just 2-3. But guys, this Louisiana Tech team right now could be the talk of the country. Why? They could have beaten Mississippi State. Let's go back and take a look at that box. When you look at the box score of this game, in the fourth quarter, they led Mississippi State 34-14. 34-14 in the fourth quarter. Mississippi State rallies, pulls out a 1-point win. They were 1 play away from beating Mississippi State. Then they played SMU. They lose by 2, right? How about this? This right here, this 33-yard pass, there is no time on the clock. It's a Hail Mary pass. And it wasn't a Hail Mary pass to an open receiver. It was a pass that bounced in the air, and Roberson grabbed it. A tip pass, touchdown. You talk about being 1 play away from beating an undefeated SMU. That's Louisiana Tech. And then the NC State game, they lose by 7. But at the end of the game, let's come down here, take a look at the end of the game here. And we find, here they are. They are at the NC State 22-yard line. 3rd and 2, pass into the end zone, intercepted, touchback. This is a team that's basically 3 plays away from being 5-0 in the talk of the country. They're playing to, the average game grades are fairly close. So the average game grades aren't there, but they need a win. And they are 2-3. They need a win. UTEP, pretty happy at 5-1. They just need 1 more win to get to a bowl game. And good job by Dana Dimmel. He's doing a UTEP. He's building this thing the right way. But I'm just looking at a team that has played the tougher schedule, number 62 versus number 128. I want you to flip to your magazine and look at Louisiana Tech as an away favorite. You'll see 17-11 against the spread. UTEP is a home dog. Flip to your UTEP page, 8-13 against the spread. So a UTEP team that hasn't beaten anybody, lost to Boise by that, and a Louisiana Tech team that's got 3 super hard luck losses. Could easily be 5-0 right now. We're going to take Louisiana Tech minus the 6.5 over UTEP. All right, let's get to your quick hitters. And I promised you I was going to look at the Iowa-Purdue game. This is a letdown situation for Iowa. They are 6-0. Of course, I think they benefited from the fact that Penn State lost their starting quarterback. A couple things to look at here. Purdue is 3-1 straight up in ATS off a bye. So they're off a bye. Once again, you can look that up in your magazine, and we have off a bye up there for your coaches. Here, look at the Minnesota game. They had a 448 to 294-yard edge, and then they beat Iowa last year, 24-20. In fact, I think these are usually close games. 6-point game, 2-point game, 11-point game. Here was a 14-point game here, but the last 3 have all been close. Iowa actually lost 2 to Purdue. For some reason, our Iowa versus Purdue last 20 years matchups does not have the Purdue game from last year. So this is actually 4 years now. Just make sure I got that right, because Todd's not usually that sloppy on that. Usually he's got that stuff taken care of. Yeah, it's missing the 2020, so he needs to get that added in here. Let's see if the Iowa part or if the Purdue part has that. I'm going to click on the Purdue page, check that out. Let's go Purdue. And let's go to the Iowa game. Here it is. There, it's got it. So actually, the last 4 games, it was a 4-point game, a 6-point game, a 2-point game, 11-point game. Purdue's getting 12.5 in this one, so there's your quick hitter leaning with Purdue. Oh, by the way, the other thing I wanted to point out about this game, and it's pretty interesting, is that Iowa's offense this year is averaging 31 yards per game, below what their opponents allow. Below what their opponents normally allow. So if you're allowing 400 yards per game, Iowa's not going to get to 400. They're going to get 31 below. And Purdue's defense is very underrated. Look at this. They're holding opponents to 300 yards per game this year, 56 yards per game below their season average. Now, these are supposed to be quick hitters, Phil, so let's go ahead and just get one. Kansas, 0-5 against the spread. Texas Tech's offense needs a win. There's one of your streak things. Jump on playing against Kansas until they actually win a game. How about UAB? Southern Miss. One thing I want to point out here, let's put Southern Miss on the right, and we're going to put UAB on the left. Southern Miss, UAB. Southern Miss has struggled. They lost their starting quarterback at the start of the year, Trelo. He got injured. Then they went to Ty Keys. Now, Keys is a VHT. He can run and throw. He got injured. Jack Lang is a walk-on quarterback. Decent, but a walk-on quarterback. And look at this. Southern Miss this year has given up 28 sacks, 16%. UAB's defense finally got the sacks going. You know, when you think UAB, you think sacks. There it is. You also think big plays. I like that matchup there. So I like UAB this week. And finally, let's take a look at the Bearcats, Cincinnati. Cincinnati needs to win big. They need to impress. Their schedule's soft. They need to win these games big. What they do last year? How about this? Look at this. 42-13, 49-10, 38-10, 55-17. I think that Coach Fickle knows how to put the hammer down. They're taking on a banged-up UCF this week. All right, 2 more games to look at. We're going to take a little tour of the FCS, see how that works out this week. And granted, it hasn't been doing great this year, but there's just so much information here on the FCS. And if you spent more time than I do looking at these FCS matchups, you'd probably come up with some great matchups. In fact, if you do, feel free to tweet me out a couple of those. I appreciate that. I'll take a look at them this week and see how they do. You know, give me the reasoning why you like the team, and I think that'll be pretty neat to look at. But we're going to take a look at Connecticut against Yale. And Connecticut's actually, I believe Connecticut's at home for this game. Yeah, Connecticut's a home dog. Now, why is Connecticut a home dog for this one, you're wondering? Well, they just lost to UMass, so everybody in the country makes Connecticut a big old joke because they just lost to UMass. But here's why I like Connecticut, +3. First of all, you know I think UMass is a better team, but we won't even bring up the old UMass thing. Let's put Connecticut here. Now, Connecticut started out the year poorly. Lost to Holy Cross by 10 at home. This is a game where some turnovers, some stopped on downs hurt them. Lost to Purdue. Army, they're dead in the water. And then they get the backdoor cover, which hurt me because I had Army in that game. It was 42-3. The difference is right here. Famanichu came off the bench and led some late drives, including this heartbreaker with 109 left, which cost me it was either a Phil Steele Plus or a inside the press box. By the way, inside the press box, winning week last week, inches away from 4-1. I'm very disappointed in that Troy game against Georgia Southern. If you watched Georgia Southern last night, you know that Troy game is a great pick. Troy led that thing at the half, for crying out loud. I'll take a quick look at Troy. Show you how disappointing that loss was. Should have been 4-1. Let's go back and look at. Well, let's look at Georgia. Well, no, let's look at Troy. Troy led 17-3 at the half with a 286 63-yard edge. I think they bumped it to 24-3 and somehow only won the game by 3. Very disappointing. But anyway, let's go back to this one. We got Connecticut on the right, Yale on the left. So let's get Connecticut pulled up. Then the next week, they hosted Wyoming. And look at this. They led Wyoming 13-3 at the half. Wyoming's a good team. Sorry about that. Just trying to save the throat. So you take a look here. Wyoming battled back to actually lead 24-16. They made it 24-22, missed the 2-point conversion. They brought Famanichu in for that and didn't get it. Then the next week they play Vanderbilt on the road. I think Famanichu got injured in this one early. And then Krajewicz came off the bench, threw for 264 yards. So this is a team that has been playing well. And then they lose to UMass last week, which is why they're a 3-point dog. Now, Yale, you look at them, and you get a complete forecast on every team. So this is a complete breakdown on Yale football, everything you need to know, how Yale has done in the past. And we could see that in 2019, they were the most experienced team in the FCS with 21 starters back, 3 quarterbacks with starting experience, and they had a heck of a year. They finished in a tie for the Ivy League crown. Come down here, you see that this year, after going from 21 starters back, they have just 11 back. Now, it says here in the write-up, and Chris did this write-up. He said their quarterback put up big numbers in all his starts back in 18. So let's go take a look at that. You can go back to 18, click on the individual player stats, and you will see that their quarterback, Griffin O'Connor, came off the bench, threw for 436, 465, 328. Once again, all this information is at your fingertips on every FCS team. It's amazing. I didn't know any of this until I looked at this last night, and then I figured this out. But here, Griffin O'Connor not having that. He's not throwing for 400 yards this year. He did have 338 against Cornell. Holy Cross, same team that Connecticut lost to. They lost to 17-20. So a note there. And then we see that the rest of his 123, 194, he's not throwing for 400 yards per game. Now, he yells off a game against Dartmouth, a big game. Lost that game by 7. It was a big Ivy League game. I just think they're an inexperienced team. And if UConn's going to win a game, they're not beating Middle Tennessee. They're not beating Clemson. They're not beating UCF. They're not beating Houston. They need to win this game. You have to win a game. So you're going to have a completely focused UConn team off an embarrassing loss. Embarrassing because of what the public thinks of UMass. But they're getting 3 at home. So I like Connecticut +3 over Yale as a play this week. Well, let's take a look at the average game grades. I didn't even do that. Let's take a quick look there. And by the way, my computer has got Connecticut winning this thing 33-20. Average game grades, Yale playing at a 63.5. Even with all these red losses, they're playing an average game grade of 70.5. So that says take UConn by 10, and they're a 3-point home dog. And your final matchup this week, and once again, we do have NFL stuff. If you click up here, go to the home page, look at NFL info. I find this fascinating. You can look at NFL strength of wins, pain of losses. Arizona has got 11, their wins have come against teams that have won 11 games. Cleveland's 3 wins have come against teams that have won 6 games, and the Browns are a 3.5-point favorite this week over Arizona. Arizona's been playing pretty doggone good. In fact, they're number 1 in that category. So that's one thing you can look at in the NFL. The team pages you can look at in the NFL are here. They are, the color coded. Let's take a look at Arizona real quick. They beat Tennessee on the road as a dog. They beat the Rams. The Rams are a heck of a team. They beat them 37-20 on the road, and they're a 3.5-point dog to Cleveland. I find that fascinating. Kyler Murray hitting 75% with a 10-4 ratio. It's a team that's outgaining its opponents by 60 yards per game. We can look at how the two teams have done against each other. Arizona's won the last 4 in the games against Cleveland. That's at your fingertips as well. So do use the NFL site. We're going to just stick with the final FCS game for you here. We're going to take a look at New Hampshire against Dartmouth. And we're going to put New Hampshire on the right, and we're going to put Dartmouth on the left. Now, this one you're going to be interested in because if you look at New Hampshire, look at the forecast. It tells you all about the team, and then comes down here and tells you about the team. So in 19, the Wildcats actually had an interim head coach. Their head coach stepped away for a year. They went 6-5, but they failed to make the playoffs for a second straight year after having made the playoffs 14 straight years. So this is basically a playoff team. They get their coach back this year in McDonald, and he actually has 12 starters back from that 19 squad, so you got to like that. So they've got their coach back. You look at their games, they did beat Stony Brook, Towson, Lafayette. They lost to Pitt. You're going to lose to Pitt. Pitt's a good team, and Pitt just blows teams out. They're a really good favorite in that respect. And then last week they only lost to James Madison by 2. You guys know James Madison's a heck of a team. They're in the playoffs every year. So I do think that this team has the capability of potentially getting back to the playoff like they used to do all the time under McConnell, 14 straight years. Meanwhile, we take a look at Dartmouth. We just talked about that Yale game. That was huge. So this is actually a sandwich spot for them in the Ivy League. They've got the Ivy League title within reach. The Harvard game is going to be big. They've got some big games coming up. And when you look at them in Dartmouth this year, Valparaiso, they're a below-average team, I would say. Sacred Heart, and then they did win their 2 Ivy League games. But the games pick them. I think that when you look at the conferences, the Colonial definitely ahead of the Ivy as far as talent goes. You got a potential playoff team, and the games pick. So I look at the 2 losses. I see Pitt and James Madison, 2 really good teams, 2 teams that are not Ivy teams. I think now that they're back playing an Ivy team, they're at home, they can win the game. So I'm going to go with New Hampshire, pick them against Dartmouth. Once again, part of that is here, average game grade 64 to 69.2, plus add in a 2-point home field edge for the FCS. That's 71. That's about 7-point difference. So we're going to go with New Hampshire, pick them over Dartmouth. Hope the voice wasn't too annoying for you. We did make it through the entire tape. Please utilize Phil Steele Plus to its fullest. I try to show you everything that's up there each and every week. Going back to the FCS, let me see if there's anything I didn't show you. In the FCS, looking at Boston College, you go all the way back down to the very bottom. This gives you red-green, tells you how the team is done, all the way back to 2011. Individual player stats, all the way back to 2011. So, I mean, it's got everything at your advantage. It's everything I use when I handicap a game. Start charts. There you go. That's who started this year. You could tell. Look at the offensive line. You can see that the offensive line has been intact all year. And you guys know, I talked to you last week about Boston College's offensive line. I think they have 4 NFL-caliber offensive linemen there. And last year, BC, poor, 102 yards per game rush, 28 sacks. This year, 4.8 yards per carry and 5 sacks all year. So the offensive line is playing to its potential. I'm going to get out of here before my voice completely gives out. But thanks for taking the Phil Steele Plus tour, and I'll be back with you next Friday morning.